Are you familiar with an artist or a musician or a writer whose works speak to you, move you, evoke strong emotions within you? Art can have a profound effect on us. The mere sight or sound can bring us joy, make us laugh, cry, or even feel anger. One such artist whose works bring me happiness is Claude Monet, recognized by many as the father of French Impressionism. I have been drawn to his work since I was a small girl, and I've had the great privilege of viewing several of his works in museums from Washington, D.C. to Paris, France. My most favorite works by Monet are the most abstract, with broad strokes, splashes of light, and lines not clearly defined. Impressionists were criticized in this particular art movement as creating mere impressions of what they saw, as opposed to realistic renderings, suggesting that the artists were incapable of properly completing a painting. But for me, this is what provides the connection and the appeal. Monet's landscape artistry gives me a sense of wanting to be right where he painted, capturing the most basic and yet most beautiful aspects of nature. Monet's life story is sometimes scandalous and sad, filled with a significant amount of both love and loss. He was born in Paris in 1840. He was a satisfactory but defiant student, preferring to sketch in his textbooks rather than to follow the day's lessons. His talents as a sketch artist were soon recognized, as he had become well known for his ability to draw caricatures. Although the profession disappointed his father, Monet was perfectly satisfied with his life, as he was quite comfortable with his ability to earn an income for himself. However, the persistent suggestions from a fellow artist eventually convinced Monet to broaden his horizons, and aren't we glad he did? Deeply saddened by the loss of his mother in 1857, Monet decided to make a change. He started painting landscapes, and while schooled in realism at the Académie Suisse, he preferred a style of painting called en plein air, which simply means painting outdoors. Monet became romantically involved with a woman named Camille, who was frequently the subject of his early paintings. Their first son, Jean, was born in 1867, and Monet and Camille were married in 1870. Shortly after their marriage, they moved to London to escape the Franco-Prussian War. They traveled extensively between France, England, and the Netherlands, with each country providing a variety of settings from which he could draw on for his paintings. Monet painted Impression Sunrise in 1872, the results of which would have a profound effect on his career. As I mentioned, Impressions were often dismissed by critics as being less than impressive artists. Impression Sunrise was displayed at the first Impressionist exhibition in 1874, and although his painting was criticized, the term Impressionist was born based on the name of Monet's painting. This marked the beginning of French Impressionism. Monet's wife Camille became very ill in 1876. She gave birth to their second son Michel in 1878, and her condition continued to deteriorate. She died of tuberculosis in 1879 at the young age of 32. Depressed and overwhelmed by the task of raising two young sons alone, Monet moved in with family friends who offered to help him raise his family. Monet eventually married his friend Alice in 1892, and together with their respective children, they moved to Giverny, where they rented a home with extensive, beautiful gardens. These gardens, which Monet tended regularly, became the subject of many of his beautiful paintings. Monet, who up until this time had enjoyed very limited financial success, vowed to never be impoverished again. He began painting with a fury, painting what are often considered some of his very best works. These paintings included the series of water lilies, willows, and Japanese-style bridge, of which he was particularly fond, in his own garden. His art began to sell, and he was able to earn a respectable income, eventually earning enough money to purchase his home in Giverny. Monet continued to travel, spending time in the Mediterranean and in London. He painted a series of landscapes of the views of Parliament, as well as the Charing Cross Bridge. These paintings stand out because of the emphasis Monet placed on capturing the light reflected in these particular locations under varying conditions, a technique which he utilized regularly in many of his works. Whether observing these landscapes in the fog, in the early morning light, the light of a sunset, or after a snowfall, Monet was a master at capturing his subjects just as he observed them. In other words, his paintings were his impressions of how something looked to him. Monet's wife Alice passed away in 1911, followed by his first son Jean in 1914. Shortly thereafter, Monet developed cataracts, a condition which interestingly affected his work. As can be seen in some of his works of art created at this time, because the cataracts affected how his eyes filtered hues, he used more reds than usual. In 1823, he successfully underwent cataract surgery, at which point he returned to painting with his familiar blue hues. Given the level of surgical technology we've become accustomed to today, I find it intriguing to think of what the conditions for eye surgical procedures must have been like in the early 20th century. Monet continued to paint up until the time of his death of lung cancer in 1826. It's difficult to obtain a tally of just how many works of art Monet produced. Plagued by depression and sometimes anger, it's alleged that he would occasionally destroy his own works, insisting that he was a substandard artist at best. It's thought that as many as 500 paintings were destroyed by the artist himself. Let's talk for a moment about the posthumous sales of Monet's works. My son, who knows of my affinity for Monet's paintings, has asked me why we have a cheap version of Monet's water lilies on our wall. My answer is simple. It's a matter of money. Several of Monet's paintings have sold in the 21st century for tens of millions of dollars. A painting of a railway bridge over the River Seine near Paris, completed in 1873, was sold at auction for a whopping $41.4 million. A painting that was part of the Water Lily series, which are my personal favorites, sold in 2008 for over $71 million. I can dream, right? If you were not already familiar with the life and works of Claude Monet, I hope I have piqued your interest and that you have a better appreciation for this remarkable artist. I hope as well that you're able to find peace, serenity, and happiness in the world of art, for it can truly soothe the soul. In the words of Claude Monet, people discuss my art and pretend to understand it as if it were necessary to understand, when it's simply necessary to love. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day.